This conference will now be recorded.
All right, let's open the meeting for March 21st, a work session of the Ennis Town Commission. Roll call. Mr. Abernathy.
Here.
Mr. Way.
Here.
Mr. Hankins, are you online?
I'm here.
You're here.
Can you hear me?
Palmerton. And Hardy.
Here.
All right. Let's do the pledge. Do the thing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God,
Liberty, justice for all.
Public comment on non-agenda items. Second call for public comment on non-agenda items. Last call for public comment on non-agenda items. All right, on to our water meter discussion, which is 10-75 of Ennis Town Code. So currently it stands that all the meters are the property of the property owner and are purchased from the town at cost. And while we're working on our grants, there was that whole discussion of whether or not the town should then actually own them since we're applying for the grants and then replacing. Thoughts, comments? That's kind of where we're at. Is do we leave it as a property owner, but then we'll figure out a way to divvy it amongst the received grants, or have the code rewritten that the meters after initial purchase? I still feel like if you are having a new building built, see what I'm saying? Everybody bought theirs initially. But as far as replacement, then it becomes.
Well, I mean, that price can be baked into the new hookup fee too.
And they change constantly. The cost of the meters. So it's something you have to be, it's harder to track.
What if you took your total grant money and divided it by the number of meters and allocated an amount to that per meter and credited each user so they benefit from the grant? They all benefit the same. When the meter breaks and it comes time to replace it, they have to replace it. It's like a heater or a water heater or any other appliance.
So,
just a thought.
So the question that I had regarding, or my biggest concern with it was we're applying for grant money to purchase materials that we're going to turn around and sell to the public at cost, as opposed to using grant money for upgrade of infrastructure like fire hydrants, or add in more valving and or repairing of city-owned equipment rather than, using grant. Is that, so my question was really, is that really the intended, I want to say not necessarily proper use of, but the intended use of grant money? I in my estimation, was to help the city improve its infrastructure or its property or its equipment, rather than simply to buy items that it's going to turn around and sell to the public, basically. So as far as what's in the code, as far as the property owner owning the and being responsible for the meter, I didn't have such heartburn with that. It was more of the use of the grant money that we were going after. Does that make sense?
Was it the grant to replace the meter?
And there is so much loss in revenue and inaccurate readings because you know what you pump out. And then you should be able to say, this is what's pumped from the 2 wells and this is what's filled. And if those meters aren't accurate, you have a larger discrepancy in knowing when you have leaks. I mean, we can run pump time. Eric was running some drawdown tests again, but when you're constantly estimating because there's so many broken meters or out of date, and it really does affect trying to judge your overall health.
So again, I'm not debating that point, whether the meters need to be replaced or they're old and failing and so on. They may very well be and need to be replaced. I was just questioning the use of grant money to purchase it. Now, if the meters were owned by the city and we applied for grant money to replace that equipment that's owned by the city, I think that's different than if we're applying for grant money to replace equipment that's owned by the individual, by the public. That's why I was questioning. That was the whole, really the crux of it.
I just now found it on my desk today. But it has not been submitted. It just got to my desk today for submission, so it has not gone in.
Oh, wouldn't that be a question for whoever is the authority that's potentially going to be issuing the grant? I mean, ultimately, I firmly believe that the town needs to own those meters because we are in the business of selling water. And if we can't track how much water we're selling, we're not potentially receiving, we're not receiving any income, and we don't track sewage just on a flat rate.
So just based off of water use.
Sewages?
Yeah.
All right.
So it's both, so you lose it both ways then.
And just for the sake of being able to answer, being accountable, where's all our water going? If we don't know where our water's going, knowing when we have to replace stuff that's either obsolete or it's not the citizen's job to come in and be like, hey, my water meter's broke. And I mean,
Nobody's gonna step forward and say, no, where's it broke? Say,
Yeah.
if your electric meter, when it breaks, you're not gonna look. Hello, my meter's not working.
sure.
And plus, my thing is, if I own a water meter, right, it's up to me to maintain it, correct? So, with my water meter, I wanna put it in a container out back, I don't want it hooked up. That's my water meter, I can do what I want.
I think, doesn't the code require,
I mean, I've lived in many towns and never once has an owner had to buy their own meter ever.
Yeah, I think,
First time I
From
ever-
all the ones that I'm looking at, it's going to be unique. Not a lot of towns actually have it as the property owners, the towns own the meters.
Which makes, that's always been my experience too. And it seems to make more sense because if, from the standpoint of, excuse me, if you wanted to upgrade your meters, like we would like to have happen, right? So the remote reading, that would save a lot of time and trouble for guys, yards, whatever. The city should be able to do that when they are able, when they want. If we decided we wanted to do that, I think that's what I heard last meeting. I heard like, ultimately, if all the meters were remote reading, that would be ideal situation. But if somebody just built a house a year or two ago, bought their water meter, they installed it for them, that would be big one. And you can buy this new meter that's remote reading. I know your meter's only 2 years old or a year old, and maybe perfectly fine. we want to replace it with a remote meter. Here it is with the cell phone. No. I don't know how well that will go over. They just go in and do it.
Well, that's where I had the heartburn on this. You have to replace these meters that we don't own, we as a town don't own, and we're gonna take the old meters out, and I've already got a buyer for them that's gonna buy the old ones for cost, he said. So now we're asking our customers to buy a new meter, and the old one that's perfectly good and still working, we are going to sell for ourselves. I just think the town needs to own all these meters, and then, 10 years down the road, maybe there's a new water meter that's whiz bang and can, read on your smartphone from anywhere on the planet or whatever. And we get a grant to replace all of them then. Then it's just quick and simple. Let's just replace these meters and go.
I think it's like it should be on a cycle. If the town owned them, then it's you plan on replacing a certain percentage every bit.
Yep.
And as long as they're compatible with our new software ideas and plan, the long-term plan would be if we own them and they're all radio reads, you wouldn't even have to drive around. I mean, it's not 2 guys for 2 days. It's push a day and it downloads it straight into Black Mountain rather than 2 guys, 2 days plus utility billing, hand inputting all of them. It's all.
But then I see the flip side of it. Now we say, okay, all these water meters are owned by the town, right? And the one you have that's 5 years old is now owned by the town of Ennis. Is that a government taking?
We'll have to auction them
Yeah,
off.
I guess it wouldn't if we were replacing them and then the town owns them. I mean, you can keep the old one. We're just going to hook up a new one for you.
Or, I mean,
But the grant's not gonna replace all meters.
No.
350.
Your water, PIR,
PER.
already says that beginning 2024, you'll replace 20% per year for 5 years.
I think we need to
a
own.
list of the oldest meters. Throughout the town, is there like a list?
There is.
of the newest?
In the last 4 years, they've all been radio reads at least.
They all been
Everything north is
Radio
radio
reads.
read,
And everything.
and
that's coming.
anything new in the older section is radio read.
Yeah, so that's an easy way to tell. And with those ones, not having to go into people's yards is amazing.
We need to own them. And if we're going to own them, we need to change 3 codes.
Yep. So, and then on the initial, is it just built into the water and sewer hookup fee?
Well, if we're gonna own the meter, why would somebody getting a new hookup be treated any differently than somebody getting a replaced meter?
True. But adding in where we don't have any, we have no impact fees, we have no anything, and depending on what it is. There's a lot of difference between a residential with a certain line and a commercial with.
Well, you look at a 2-inch meter for $1,300 with the industrial and commercial uses, or
Are the same meters used for residential and commercial?
the same meter, but different size.
Yeah.
And not all commercial gets a big meter.
Okay.
Those that have a big water demand, hospital, the nursing home, the school. School's got
Okay.
9, 11 meters.
I think there's a difference
Oh, wow.
between an existing meter being replaced and a new construction, new meter going in. That they're gonna have to pay for that meter whether,
Why?
because it's new infrastructure into the sewer, into the water.
They're already paying a fee to connect.
Right. And they have to pay for it, the way you look at it. So if it's a new meter, that would be part of the connection fee. It's just they're paying the city for it instead of their part.
Should be baked into the connection fee.
Doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not making a decision.
I agree. I think it should be hooked into the water connection fee. Maybe not sewage, but water connection.
Yeah, I think just going back to what you said about impact fees, like, I mean, ultimately, if we're gonna change some stuff and we need to raise rates, if you will, for new, new hookups. I don't even know what our previous fees or what our current fees are for that. I guess you just said it, $375 for a new 3/4 inch line.
$357 for the meter. That's not the connection.
Is there a way to make it part of, if plumber comes into apply for the permits, the order? Get part of the
Plumber
permit
doesn't
fee?
apply, the plumber
Yeah.
doesn't get a permit.
You don't, contract, or anything?
The builder, developer, owner gets a permit from the zoning department, and they pay a connection fee for the sewer and the water.
You didn't make the contract, will take that into the cost of the house.
It needs to be baked into the fee somewhere, but
So do we all agree that the town should own the meters though, ultimately?
Yes.
I think it
Yes.
would alleviate headaches down the road. And all the new ones are more, they're tamper proof. Well, they have kind of. They have an alarm system that can be activated if they're tampered with.
oh, and also we probably need to get rid of G and 10.7.5 meters, meter reading. It should be the property or responsibility to read your own meter. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we should probably strike that whole.
Needs to go to, the meters are basically property of the town.
Mhm.
And same with the fittings connected to. Pretty much everything there is also, the fittings are also part of it.
Well, that's in the $357, those 2 unions. But your curb stop is between the main line and the meter, and they're responsible by the ordinance for that line
For the service line
and the curb stop.
and the curb stop.
So I guess an additional question is, so is Eric and Kyle gonna be going in and installing all of these replacement ones on everyone's house? And that's
Yep.
Easy enough to do, though. I mean,
Eric says it is.
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
2 unions.
They replaced ours and he was there for like maybe 10 minutes. So it wasn't overly complicated.
Ones that are a little more difficult to get to might take a little bit longer, but.
Yeah.
Just depending on where they're located in.
Some in basements and closets. Have to gain access.
sure. And that's just something the town's gonna have to budget in if we change out, if we get 300 meters this year, we're gonna change out 300 meters, so in 10 years, yeah, the public works will have to go and change every one of
Rotate
those
them out.
meters out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It'll have to be done in phases and you can
Yeah.
apply for additional grants for the next phase, the next
Yeah.
phase.
620 water meters.
Not possible.
That number sounds about
Pretty
what it is.
close.
It's under 700.
The radio. So if you get 300 and you've got 100, 400, it's gonna take a big chunk out of what? Out of that, say 620.
And then we're okay with basically changing 107A to be the property of the town, along with the fittings.
C looks okay.
C is
Yeah.
fine.
D looks okay.
D is good.
E and F.
Same with E and F. G needs to be getting,
The first part of G needs to be struck.
yeah.
I have
You have other places.
10712, B and C need to be
Getting ahead.
adjusted.
Yeah, that's anywhere else in there. Make sure that we got it. We'll kind of go through 7.6. That's the payments and charges. I don't think we need to change anything in there. Anything that you've run into, Maria, as you're doing billing that,
Is it covered in here who pays the water bill and that process, or is that in a resolution?
oh, you mean if it's billed to the property owner versus the,
That's not in here.
That's in 10.2.1.
one?
I want to give you a visual. All of the ins and outs. This is 23 and 24 to date. The amount of people moving in, moving out, the property managers who 30 days after the fact notify you and expect you to be a mind reader and know what the meter said the day that their last tenant moved out. It's a nightmare, and it's extremely time consuming. If the owner paid for the water, they can build it into, if it's a rental. It's a big burden on the town.
Is there a change fee?
I beg your pardon?
Is there a change fee? Change those?
Not to, yes, $10 to set up a new responsible party.
To be honest with you, that's really cheap.
It is really cheap,
It is, it should be like 50, 70 bucks.
but the number, I just think it would be to the town's benefit. Property sells, that is an in and out, you have to make that change. But the rentals
I,
are way heavier in numbers than, as compared to the sales.
I agree with you 100%, and I think it needs to be changed. Where I'm having a little heartburn on this is we did not, I worry about noticing because we noticed 10.7, 10, but we didn't notice 10.2.
10-2, ownership.
So
Yeah,
put it on another agenda.
that's what I mean. I mean, I agree with you that we probably should look at that for a change, but maybe not right here, right now.
2, 1. A lot of them. All right. Back to 7-6. If I can find it again. So was there anything in fees and charges that kind of stood out to anybody? I wanted to make sure that we kind of went through it just, and again, I don't know what the right answer there is for if somebody's really in need, but I guess we can always kind of just ask groups if somebody really needs help.
Well, that was the only reason I was referencing 10.2.1. It says, in their accounts which are 60 days past due may become a lien on the property. That's so we're
And they do.
And they
If they
do.
don't pay up.
okay. Well, it's kind of weird
We
that
do
that's
try to give them
sure.
a payment plan. We don't want to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the last resort.
and I guess what does that fee look like if you go and file a lien? It's $15 to file at the clerk and recorder's office, somebody's time, $5.
I just did.
Yeah, I guess, just something to think about what we're charging them when we release the lien, because you also have to go back up and file.
Lien release.
So it's just another $5.
When do you shut the water off?
When do you shut it off?
Yeah, we have payment. How long do you go before you shut it off?
60 days. Water may be shut off after 60
Maybe.
days.
We haven't had to shut it off anyhow. In 15, 16 months that I've been here.
Instead of doing the lien, shut the water off. $50.
If there are children in the home, then we have to notify the police, they have to notify protective services, they pull the kids out of the home. There's a lot of,
I don't, I've had many rental properties, And when the top tenant or owner does not pay the water, 30 days, it's shut off. And then they have no water. It's up to them. The only time, those things that would not get shut off would be like gas. You would not shut that off during the winter because it is cold and you do have kids. But during the decent months.
I'm just
I
sharing
know,
with
I'm
you
just saying. it's
what
just-
the Montana situation is.
Right. I'm just, I'm looking at the differences out. Like I said, many have rental properties where they shut the water off. And then if you want the water back on, you have to come current, and it's a $50 fee to turn it back on.
We have a fee to shut it off, we have another fee to turn it back on.
I know, I was just curious how long it goes instead of putting a lien. Because then you're paying for your personnel to go through the fee, however many hours that takes. The filing fees are,
When they're 60 days past due, they get a letter in the mail giving them the date that the water will be disconnected if they don't pay. 72 hours, business hours prior to that disconnect date, they get a letter taped to their front door. There are some customers that don't pay until that letter gets on their front door.
now that they get a late fee, in fact, on top of this.
There's a $10 late fee for anything 30 days past due, plus to 2% of the past due amount. So every month it accrues $10 to $11. Call them again. Normally by the end of the month cycle, they pay up. But
But then
it's,
you don't recoup all your time.
well, I don't stay here any extra time.
Well, I'm just saying, but still, there's time that could be spent doing other things. The same with whoever has to travel to go file these liens, or to go travel to remove the lien.
There are a lot of people that pay that $10 to $11 a month, every month.
How many
Not
liens?
making money.
We don't,
Yeah. I mean,
Haven't
I think
been that
those,
many.
I think that time consumption is getting.
Yeah,
for
it's
those-
like,
Those fees.
like she said, it's less than a dozen on the liens. We try and hack it with whatever else we have to do in Virginia City at the same time.
It's not like we're doing 5 a year.
No,
I think there's less than 5, maybe
Yeah.
a total of 5.
so most of them are cleaned up. I don't know. You can up it, but I don't think it's gonna change it.
I was just curious.
And those are the ones that probably don't have a lot extra. Any other thoughts on it? But I think it's not been huge. But while we were at it, figured we'd look at it. If there's any other questions on it.
Yeah, I'm good with all that. And then 10, 7, 12, just needs a couple of updates to B and C.
So leave 10.7.6 alone.
Yep.
6 stays as is. And then 12. All right, so 7.12, 10-7-12. And B and C are our ownership and installation costs that have to be adjusted.
So who's going to be putting the water meters in new homes, Eric?
Probably the contractor.
Mm-hmm.
They would just have to come and get it. They all have serial numbers, so we tie that serial number to the residence that
Property.
is going into.
And so how, I guess one other question, how are we going to track when these need to be replaced? Is there going to be some sort of alarm or something?
Well,
set?
Currently, when they read the meters, if it's not working, we flag the manual sheet that it's on. And we have a database of those for the utility department to work off of.
But Corey, in our records, as the meter goes out, it's dated as well. So we should be able to go to that book. They should be in order of how they went out, date-wise.
Right.
It's got the address, the date, et cetera. So just off of that, we can even build a database of these are the meters, this is the address it went into, and this is the install date. And then you could just refer back to that over the years and say, okay.
And these are pretty much, I mean, will we use them until they fail? I guess is my next question. Are they going to send an error code into the town and then we'll replace them at that time?
You mean the new ones that are going in?
The new ones, yeah.
Well, they're not working within an hour.
We'll know it.
Sure.
So that might be the key to either to go check it, see if it needs a repair or replacement.
Okay. Yeah, as long as we have a plan for, we'll have a bunch of
Process.
stock and, yeah.
So in B, we just need to strike,
Strike that one line. Yeah.
shall in addition pay the town for meters required by the town.
Mhm. Yeah.
But leave the rest.
Maybe we don't have to do anything with C. I highlighted it. I have to reread it.
I don't think you have to with C.
I don't think we have to. That was my mistake. I highlighted it, but I think I was wrong. We're good.
My pen died. That's not good. All right, so that fixes the water meter ownership in all the sections, I think. Was there any other places? I didn't find any other.
I looked.
I couldn't find any others. So I think that's it, but I put that on there in case anybody else found one that I missed.
You will do a search on it as well.
Okay.
I looked at zoning, figured maybe there was something with water and drainage. Looked at sewer.
You never know where it's going to pop up.
Yeah.
Maybe it was
It's all
mentioned
over.
in there.
Okay. All right, now we're on to the business licenses from back to section 3.7.1.
So before we go on, so we're gonna change these at the next meeting. We'll do a public hearing. Is that?
We should do a resolution first to
a res-
do that and then set the public hearings for the changes.
Okay.
So I'll prep a resolution for changing ownership and where we're gonna strike it.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Business license and regulation. So 262, Senate Bill 262, which is not the same as House Bill 262, kind of threw a weird spin on towns and business licenses. And we have a whole fee schedule set based on different businesses and types. And really, Senate Bill says if they have a state issued license.
Yeah, I mean, really subsection 13 on that and subsection 26 on that bill are the ones that really apply. And I think 13 is the one that really applies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, any power that applies affects the, well, that's the landlord section. That's for short-term rentals. That's the one we're gonna have to talk about eventually too.
So,
In 26 is prohibited any power town to require additional licensing when the state is the original issuer of a license. So I hold an outfitter's license. You can't charge me to be an outfitter in Ennis. I think that's what it states, right?
yeah, that's what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But, John, you should be able to do the basic license for merchandise,
Yeah, I've read this like,
for retail sales.
I've read this like 100 times in the last couple of days.
I don't.
Ask our attorney.
So James sent out on the listserv. James, why don't you pop into our business license discussion and update us on what you dug into and found?
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, so the first thing I did was I sent out a request to Thomas Jourdain, who's the staff attorney for Montana League Cities and Towns. He's the staff attorney up there, and they give us assistance when we request it. And basically asked him to circulate a question to the other municipalities and find out, you know, how they're dealing with this very same issue. Okay, so far, well, that went out yesterday morning, so I haven't heard anything back on that, which is not particularly surprising. And, you know, I might, if I don't get anything directly back through the league, I might just pick up the phone and call Greg Sullivan, the city attorney in Bozeman, and ask him, you know, what they're doing about it, because I imagine in Bozeman, they're looking at substantial potential revenue loss if they can't, you know, issue business licenses, you know, on the same basis they've been doing. But, you know, Commissioner Way, you're exactly correct. I mean, you're exempt if you're running a guide business. That's one of the Title 37 state licensed businesses that's essentially exempt. And if you go through there, if you look at Title 37, I mean, there's like 30 subparts. Quite a few of them have been repealed. But just give you an idea, I mean, most of it deals with professionals, like, you know, from a medical standpoint, right? Doctors, physicians, those types of occupations, dentists. You have public accountants, real estate brokers and salespersons. That one's interesting. Title abstractors, real estate appraisers, property managers, attorneys at law, some weird ones in here, polygraph examiners. I don't know how many of those you have down in Ennis, but, you know, and then, of course, plumbers and electricians and a few these other professions. So, you know, you could always bring that up and take a look at Title 37 to see who's covered. And later, you know, in the afternoon today, I called the staff attorney who actually, he wrote that SB 262, and he's been in Helena. He's staff attorney for the Montana legislature for 10 years. His name is Jameson Walker, you know, and I asked him, what is your favorite cocktail? And he's like, it's neither Jameson or Johnny Walker, just an aside there. But he said, he confessed to me, he's like, yeah, there was a lot of discussion about this. And some of the legislators, I mean, they had objections about it. They were very concerned about how it might apply. And there was actually a proposal to include verbiage in that, I think it's sub 26 there, that it talks about cannot have an additional business license if the person is already licensed by the state. So in that section, they were going to insert Title 37 professions, but it didn't make it to the final draft. So he said, as it is right now, it's somewhat vague. And I'm like, well, that's great. You're the guy who wrote it. And he's like, well, I don't get involved with the politics of it all. How do you deal with it from your perspective going forward? How many businesses are licensed and how many would be exempt? And then another question I have for you guys is like, let's say you have a title company down there, and you also have several real estate companies. Do they pay for, or do they have Ennis business licenses? Have they been doing that, paying for those?
Yeah.
Historically, they have.
Now, let me ask you this, Mr. Bob. Thank you for what you said so far. When I run into questions like this, I tend to look at, especially with new bills that just become law, I tend to look at, when I don't understand them, I look at the intent. And what I get from this is the intent of this bill was to reduce the power and reduce the red tape, and it was driven originally SB 262 by the governor's red tape reduction initiative. And so with that in mind, I feel the intent was to reduce red tape, but I don't believe red tape, meaning that multiple layers of the same type of regulation, the same type of license, the same type of fee stacking between local, city, state, and federal. And that's what I felt the intent of this was, is to whittle down some of that at the governor's, discretion, at his urging. But I feel that like things like business licenses aren't, because they're not specifically, when they're not specifically mentioned, they're excluded. I mean, that's the way I read it. If it doesn't say exactly business license,
And that's what I was,
they're excluded.
that was
Because this
where I was
prohibits,
thinking.
this prohibits a lot of things, and it mentions very clear, ham radio antennas. I mean, it prohibits us from regulating that. It does not say business license. So I would deem it as, if not mentioned, it's an exclusion until told otherwise, along with the intent of the bill. I say go forward. Just my opinion.
Leave them as is.
Leave them as is.
Including stuff like short-term rental.
Well, we're gonna have to talk about the short-term rental, because section
That
13
one.
in here is pretty clear about short-term rentals.
And this is my problem with the whole thing. We had issues with a contractor in town where their staff was running into multiple legal, they were running into it with the county sheriff, and we had same crew was getting Fish, Wildlife and Parks. Our police department had run-ins constant. It was a really good run of, this is not, your crew is not behaving. So then a letter was sent saying, basically, get your crew together and get it straightened out, or I'm revoking your business license. So I did that. I think it was, I don't know, my first year, because you cannot do things in our public spaces with your crew, and it won't be tolerated to have that kind of work done here. So it gave us kind of a regulation in its own way. You know what I mean? It is public safety. And if I have to be able to say crew is creating an unsafe environment in the town, I don't think it should be able to operate here. You're not entitled to work here. We're granting you that ability with the stipulation that you follow the law.
Nikki, let me just chime in here again and get back to Commissioner Way there on his comment. So if you look at that, the amendment at 7-1, 111, sub
Yeah.
26, right? Sub 26. It's prohibited. Any power to require additional licensing when the state is the original issuer of the license. And, you know, part of that conversation I had with Jameson Walker, the staff attorney up there, I thought, I was suspecting that maybe this had to do with like transient, you know, food trucks, you know, the vendors, the food vendors. And, you know, so they get maybe they get a certificate, safe handling, food certificate, whatever it is. And so I was thinking, you know, maybe that was the intent so that they could go from town to town and they could set up and they're not required to, you know, fill out another form and get a business license everywhere they go for every event, you know, special events coming up on your agenda. But he gave me the example, what he thought it mostly applied to. He gave me the example of a plumber. He's like, you know, a plumber is licensed by the state. So you might have a plumber from Townsend comes down there to start working on a project, and he's doing some installations. And if you were to go up to him and say, hey, you need a license to do business in the town of Ennis, that I think is a very clear example of where this would apply, and you would not be in good standing to say that that plumber from out of town has to get, you know, a license to business in your town. Now, I asked him, well, what if that plumber though decided to open up a storefront and he starts selling plumbing fixtures, and, you know, people are walking in and he's scheduling service calls right out of the storefront. He said, you know, that's a good example. That might be an example where you could say, okay, you need a license to run your business, your storefront in the town. But you can't require the people that are listed on Title 37 to get a separate license to do business. I don't know. Does that clear things up at all?
What you do.
But, I mean, that's exactly what I do. I mean, I hold an outfitter's license, a Title 37 occupational professional business license, but I sell a whole bunch of flies and gear. So my business license is for the tackle shop. It's not for Montana Way Outfitters, which is licensed through the state.
Okay. So
You know, and
Right.
I might see it a different way. I mean, I see a little twist on it. Yeah, we cannot require, how I read this, and maybe I'm wrong, but how I read this is we cannot require a plumber to get a plumbing license from the town because he is already licensed through the state. But we can require him to get a business license if he is doing business in town.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's how I read it. And again, I'm probably wrong, but I like to cut the edges of things
Well,
sometimes.
And
If I was the plumber, John, excuse me, but if I was the plumber in that
Yeah.
case, I would say, I have a license to plumb. The state gave me a license to go plumbing, and I'm going to plumb wherever I plumb, and you're not going to stop me. I'm not going to pay for an additional license. I mean, I'm an attorney and I'm listed in Title 37. I mean, not me personally, but attorneys are listed in Title 37 as a profession that's exempt from any other business license. And I got to tell you, I mean, if I decided to open up a business storefront in James Greenbaum, you know, private attorney at law, I would not be paying anybody any fee whatsoever to operate as an attorney. There's no way I disagree with that. I think it's a good argument, but I don't think that's going to work, because I think that's exactly the intent of this, is that the guy's got a license to go plumbing. He doesn't need another license. And I understand what you're saying. It's not a license to plumb. It's a license to do business in our town. But that's his business. His business is plumbing. You know, it's like it's splitting hairs, and I don't think that's the intent and the purpose. I think the actual intent was to say you don't need an extra business license to go do your thing where you're going. Because I mean, then the same plumber, he goes to Townsend, he goes to Three Forks, he goes to Dillon, he goes to every place he goes. Are you going to say that he has to fill out and get another business license? And I think that's exactly what they were trying to do here, is to prevent, people who are licensed through Title 37 from having to get these multiple different licenses. Now, is there a way around it? Yeah, there's potentially another way around it. And so I was kicking some ideas around with Chief John Moore, and he's a smart guy, and he studies this stuff probably more than I do in some certain cases. I mean, he's the one who has to go out and generally investigate and and enforce these code violations. And his take on it, his suggestion was maybe it's not a license, it's a registration. So, and even though we're calling it something different, if the purpose is not to say we're giving you a license to do this business, you already have the license to do it. We're not saying that. What we're saying is we're asking you to register with the town so that we know who's doing business here. Are you storing hazardous waste? Do you have volatile substances on your premises? How many persons are employed? What are the hours of your operation? And you try to connect it to some other, safety, health, and security standpoint. And in particular, like with the storefronts, it would be more of a compliance registration certification. And again, I haven't worked out the details. I might only started looking at this yesterday and in earnest this morning, but I think that's the way that you might want to look at it.
Well, there is a difference between things that way. Like a professional license is issued by the state. And professional licenses require whatever, depending on the license.
Qualification, you mean?
Continuing education, whatever it is, your initial and then your upkeep of that license. It's why the state of Montana has always stayed with EMTs being under Board of Medical Examiners. They're licensed. Other states have certifications, and it's not actually the same thing. Our national registry for EMTs is a certification, which isn't a license. They don't actually verify our skills, and we're not accountable to them. We're accountable to the board because they hold our professional license and therefore can revoke it. I mean, as a town, you couldn't do that. You couldn't revoke their EMT license. That's held completely with the state. So that's my take on it. Is a professional license is them verifying and going through the process, and we don't do that. So we would be like more of a certification. It's like the national registry. Like, yeah, cool. Here's your card if you want to be part of the registry.
In Greenbob's situation, you put a registration process in place, and he would have to register in the town of Ennis as an attorney.
Under my scenario, I mean, if you're asking me, I wouldn't comply with that. I mean, I'm just telling you that personally. I'm not saying that it's not a legitimate workaround, but the problem is they really did leave it quite vague. And it's like to require additional licensing when the state is the original issuer of the license. Now, you could read it very broadly. You could also try, I think the way John is suggesting, you give it a very narrow interpretation. So let's say you have a marijuana dispensary down there. The guy's going to say, I have a license from the state of Montana. I'm licensed to, dispense marijuana. I'm not going to give you another license. I'm not going to pay for another license to distribute marijuana. I've already got it from the state. I mean, they deliberately left it vague. And it's certainly problematic. I mean, I'm not going to give you, I don't think I'm in a position to give you like 100% certainty as to what to do. I mean, not tonight anyway, you know, but it's definitely, I mean, I'm glad that Mayor Nikki put this on your agenda because this is definitely something that we have to consider. And I think being proactive is a great place to start on it.
Sure, yeah, it says require additional licensing, and we're not, this is registration. So, yep, I think we move forward under that.
July
And it
1st,
could be
then.
that, Corey. It could be as simple as just changing the name of you change the name of your ordinance. So it's not a business licensing, it's a business registration ordinance. And then you recreate the purposes and the intent that it's, and you make it very clear that there's no intent here to require additional licensing for those who already have a license. This is simple a registration process. So we know who's doing business in our town, the type of business that's being conducted, and you have a checklist of things, your fire safety, your security safety, your public health and safety, and you approach it from that standpoint, and you might be able to, I mean, give you a fighting chance at least to distinguish it from that standpoint.
So, Mr. Greenbaum, you said you spoke with Bozeman. How are they, and maybe you said this, how are they handled? Because every town in the state that requires a business license is going to have to redo their code at this point. If we interpret this broadly.
Correct. No, I did not yet speak with Greg Sullivan, the city attorney in Bozeman. I didn't get a chance to speak with him yet. So far, I spoke with the staff attorney, Montana legislative staff attorney, Jameson Walker, and I circulated a query through the Montana League, hoping that I get a response back from how these other attorneys and other municipalities are dealing with it. I mean, I would expect the issue might come up in May at the Tillotson Continuing Legal Education Seminar. I mean, the best and the brightest attorneys from around Montana gather for that, including Kelly Lynch from the Montana League, who spends most of her days working with the legislature. I mean, I expect that Sarah Sexy from Great Falls will be there. She's also, been around doing this type of work for 20 years. She would be the type of attorney on top of it, as well as, Greg Sullivan from Bozeman. But, I don't know that I want to wait that long to try to get some feedback and direction for you guys. But it's definitely an issue. It's definitely an issue that, yeah, I think these other bigger municipalities are going to have to figure it out. And, which is somewhat to the advantage of a smaller town like Ennis. We don't necessarily have to always be reinventing the wheel. The bigger government bodies, I mean, they have staff attorneys. They put in a lot more time into it. And, we go around, we piecemeal the stuff that they do and try to make it work for a smaller town. Because you don't necessarily want, just because Bozeman does something one way in Missoula or Billings or Great Falls or Helena, I mean, they're bigger entities. They can afford to have bigger and, bigger ordinances and more paperwork. It doesn't always necessarily fit, the purposes of a smaller town. But we'll look and see what they come up with, and if I get any answers, I mean, I'm going to just keep sending that along to Nikki, and then she'll forward it all to you.
So convention's in April, right?
May. First week of May is the Tillotson.
Well, that's inconvenient for this.
So short-term rental is in here?
Yeah, section 13,
Mm-hmm.
subsection 13 on there.
So,
Good to have something in place in June so we can send out the notices to current business license owners about their upcoming business registration.
Right, because you can still charge for business or you can still charge for registration through the town.
Yeah, I'm reading subsection 13. I don't know if this is the final red line version, but I don't see how this would actually materially affect the town.
Section 13, intended to license landlords or to regulate their activities with regard to tenants beyond what is provided in Title 70, 2024, section not to restrict local government's ability to require landlords to comply with ordinances or provisions that are applicable to all other businesses or residences within the local government.
Right. So
So
does the town at this time license landlords?
Only short-term.
Short-term rentals.
yeah, is on here. So I
Only
think we need
short-term
to,
rental. Only short-term landlords, not long-term landlords.
The town license short-term rentals. You have to, if you want to do a short-term rental, you have to come in and get a license to do that.
Yes.
Well, it's going to be a registration in the future.
Well, and again, I don't know that you're regulating their activity. That when the power is intended to license landlords. Yeah, I think Corey's onto it. It's just a registration. We just need to know what type of operations, what type of business is being conducted, and what we can expect as far as flow of traffic and transients, and so.
But then look at SB 467, which you also attached, and I've read that too. 467 is the companion bill. And, new section 1 of SB 467, a short-term rental is a residential use of property. A county planning or zoning commission may, it doesn't say shall. That's the key right there. May not adopt or enforce any regulation, restriction, resolution, or ordinance that would prohibit short-term rentals, have the effect of prohibiting short-term rentals, or regulate the number, duration, frequency of rental periods of short-term rentals. May, not shall. They made a mistake there.
And currently, with our licensing, there is no restriction. It's holding them accountable to the state and county regulations. They have to produce those documents before we'll license or register them.
So are you saying that it's not applicable because it says may not shall? Where did that say?
May.
It's like we could or we couldn't, but it doesn't really say
It doesn't say shall.
shall.
If I say you may
Well,
not.
I wouldn't get too hung up on the may versus shall. I just think that it's pretty clear they don't want, they don't want any counties, and it's talking about a county planning and zoning commission, okay? And what does it say about local, city or town may not, okay, same thing for a city or town.
Commissioners.
Yeah,
So again, as long as you're not prohibiting it or regulating number, duration, or frequency of rental periods, then you're fine. So you're not going to prohibit it. That's clear. You're not going to prohibit it. You're not going to regulate the number, duration, or frequency of rental periods. In other words, what they're saying there is that you can't say, oh, if you're running a short-term rental, it has to be at least 5 days or 7 days or 30 days. So, and you can only do it, 5 times a month, and each period has to be at least 4 days. That's what that last phrase is. But it doesn't say that you can't regulate short-term rentals to be of, maybe it has to have a specific setback. Maybe it has to have, special screening from view. Maybe it cannot exceed a certain amount of square footage compared to the, if it's an additional dwelling unit, and that's getting into another topic though. But there are things that you can regulate. And in fact, I mean, one of the things that they were talking about was regulating the number of short-term rentals per density. So you're not regulating the actual rental period, which that's right. They don't want you to create an ordinance that restricts how often they can rent it and for how many nights. Right? You can't like redefine what is a short-term rental, but you can regulate the number of short-term rentals that are allowed in your municipality. And you can regulate those entities by zoning and other issues relating to setbacks, landscaping, perhaps,
Yeah, you can't do
size.
business. You can't
Yeah.
regulate it as the business portion.
Yeah, exactly. Because this, 467 ties into 262 because they're both 7-1, 111. 467 adds a new section to 111, which we've just been discussing. And so you refer back to that on section 13, and it says, you shall not affect landlords as defined as 7024-103 when the power is intended to license landlords or regulate their activities with regard to tenants beyond what is provided in Title 70. And the new section on this says a short-term rental is a residential use of that property. So I think they tie together.
That's right. Put them
Well,
together.
that's
You have to-
correct. But to say that you're not regulating their activity, you're regulating the size of the structure or where those structures could be located. I mean, I don't see anything in here that says that you can't create a zoning overlay district where short-term rentals are simply not allowed. They might say, well, you can't prohibit it from a residential use because they've defined it as a residential use. So you might not be able to prohibit it from your residential zoning district, but within a residential zoning district, you can establish certain setbacks and you could other zoning requirements that don't prohibit, but regulate it to a degree that makes sense for your growth plan.
But how do you interpret this? I mean, it says you are prohibited when that power is intended to license landlords or to regulate their activities with regard to tenants. So we are prohibited from licensing landlords.
Mhm.
Whether
Doesn't
it be
that go back to the registration?
It does. We could get around it with the registration, but I think section 13 in 262 is fairly clear, at least to me. It says you are prohibited this power of intended to license landlords or regulate their activities with regard to tenants. I think we are prohibited from licensing landlords.
That's a fair reading of that. But if you're not licensing them, you're just asking them to register. Maybe that's
I
how
agree
you
with
come
that
around it.
because
I don't know.
And my
I think I agree with that because
take on it. Oh, sorry, Nikki.
sorry.
You go.
It's a good source of revenue for the town through the business licenses. So for us to get rid of all that affects the budget negatively. If we can still charge a registration fee, that would if it's legal to do that, I think that would be the way to go without, yeah, that's all I got.
And no offense to the state and whoever thought this was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Um, you're not here. So part of the business licensing and, or if you want to call it registration, is us knowing who's operating in town to what ends. So that you can, I kind of feel like your neighbor should know that you're running a short-term rental. If you're doing it, you're running a business right next to where they're living. And maybe they're going to be a little more apt to lock their door because that's where the only thing that we've run into for short-term rentals in town thus far have been a couple people that had a good time downtown, tried to make it back to their short term and ended up in the neighbor's house. And we're in Ennis and we're not really great about locking. So our
Fishing guides for the same thing.
so we just the
So
intent
I can
of
tell you,
short-term rentals was to verify where they were at and ask that they put who the contact person is should something happen.
that's right. And if you look at, the city of Bozeman, they studied that issue. There's the short-term rental issue for about 2 or 3 years, and they finally came out with their draft, and they adopted their local ordinance regulating short-term rentals, and they might have to modify some things based on these two amendments. But if you look at what they created, it's a checklist that it goes into all details about fire and health and security and safety, the fire detectors and the inspection certificates from the, licensed electrical and everything all the way down the line. And if you look at the details of their checklist, you would say it's not an attempt. It's not intended to license them. It is, as Nikki is saying, the intent was for public health and safety so that, you get a certificate that confirms that you're in compliance with all these public health and safety regulations for your short-term rental. Those are your broadest powers are under general health and safety, general welfare, health and safety. That's the way you get it. That's the way you get through your legislation. Yeah, you just have to tie it into some kind of a health and safety issue, security.
I would say when I had his rentals in different states, every year say if I had 4 properties, I had to register. I had to fill out a questionnaire of how many bedrooms, everything pertaining to whichever property it would be. And for the health and safety, I don't think you guys do it out here, but every time a tenant would move out and a new tenant would come back in, this is I'm talking long term, you would have to get a CO where an inspector would come in and make sure your plumbing's good, your electrical's good, and all that's good. And you issue a CO so that tenant could move in. But you still had to register, like every year, I would go and I would register, fill out 4 forms as a landlord, and I would pay a fee for each one of those rentals. That could be a way, like, say, think like John's suggestion with the registration. You're still gonna get, it's just worded differently instead of a license, your landlord registration.
It would apply to all rentals, not
All
just
rentals.
short term.
Well, even short
Right.
terms, anything.
Right.
If I had a property and you were renting it, you needed to register with that town exactly what that property was. And again, who do you contact in case of emergency? It's on fire, who they're gonna call? They want the landlord's name.
Right, so in our fee schedule, it specifically says short-term rental. That would need to be amended to basically any rental, right, long or short-term.
It is a
Or
source
why
of
would you-
income. It's doing business.
Long-term
Yeah.
and short-term rental, any rental is a source of income, right? So how do you differentiate between, regulate short terms, but not long terms? If you're gonna regulate rental, it's,
You're regulating the landlord, isn't it?
You're regulating the landlord, which is, that power is prohibited
whether
by
it,
section 13.
No matter whether you're
To regulate.
Sure, and I think ultimately you got to look at what all this stuff that's been put in front of us, what is their intention on doing this? And the state's currently trying to figure out how to come up with other sources of income other than a sales tax. So that's immediately where my mind goes, that they're like gonna maybe get rid of our fees and uh, raise fees on all of these statewide, including, the whole VRBO thing. I attempted to contact the Department of Commerce today to see if they had any input on how we track VRBOs, or if there's a map of it, who you end up talking to. Big Sky talks to VRBO and Airbnb, and that's where they have an agreement with those guys, and they tack their resort tax onto that, and they tax through a resort tax on VRBO. So they, Mhm. Yeah.
Pretty common for municipalities to work with the they're collecting the taxes and they're paying on the actual. Everyone's not collecting them.
Right.
I know coming from a resort in Florida, they were all over the city. They were working with the PTO, and so landlord, you don't have to landlord register. They're going to work with you. You don't have to register.
Right.
So we want to have Airbnb, we want to have any of the landlords that are doing property management, the collectors, the other, the force that register.
But regardless, I guess my comment is like, so what if they come back and make an amendment with this? They're like, yeah, good idea. Sorry, it's gonna go away. I don't know how long that takes, but yeah, then we keep digging for loopholes. So
One issue that I thought, and I don't know how relevant this is. I don't even know it's something that the commission, the mayor would even be concerned or interested in even considering. But I mean, at some point, you have to look at maybe what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your business license or business registration, and is it even worth it? Or, how much revenue is involved? And then, how could you recover that through just an additional, the way that you tax properties to begin with? It's like that's kind of the impression that you get when you look at this from the state is coming down on the local government and saying, we really don't want you doing this anymore, is what they're pretty much saying. It's like, if you're thinking about doing this, regulating Airbnbs, no, we found out it's a residential use. We're kind of in favor of it. I mean, that's top-down management. The state is saying that to you. You could figure out ways that you could maybe regulate it through your zoning. So, maybe restrict how many Airbnbs you have. But basically, the state is saying, we see this as potential revenue for a state like Montana, which, a good amount of your funds come through tourism. And so they don't want you messing with that. And then on the business licensing thing, they're basically saying as well, it's like, you know what? We've got all these complaints coming in from everybody's running a business and everybody's got to go get a business license. Maybe it's time to start transitioning out of that as a revenue source and saying, maybe we just have to raise our base levy across the board.
Or James, did I hear you correctly? Are you suggesting a resort tax?
No,
I mean, look, I know that you're a big proponent of it. I'm not a proponent. I can't advocate or be a proponent of one thing or another. I could just tell you that, I can interpret the law for you. I could guide you. I could help you on drafting certain things. You want to ask me my personal opinion on whether I think a resort tax is a good thing or not for Ennis? I don't know. That's for the people of Ennis to decide.
So, in my mind, again, the state says they want to do this, that, and the other. It still doesn't change the fact that I don't see a lot of state officials coming down and keeping an eye on things. So, but to discriminate in this different fee schedule doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if you're operating here, we'd like you to register. It does take us a little bit of time and manpower to figure it out. You do a business registration so we can at least have a pulse and a requirement to know what you're doing in town. Or I guess the illegal ones aren't going to do it anyway. It's not like you're like, hey, I'm a drug dealer on the side. It's my private business and I'm going to register that. But it still does create a little bit of tracking and a little bit of accountability in being part of a community. I would say
I
you
don't
go.
think there's any harm, Nikki, in that sort of approach to it. And in fact, I think you could probably support that through your general welfare safety powers. Like if somebody comes into town and says, "Hey, I'm plumbing over here," and you're like, "Well, are you a registered plumber?" "Oh, I have a license." "Yeah, but how do we know that you have a license? Have you registered? We're not going to say that you can't operate, but we'd like to get you registered, and I don't know how many people that you regulate in that fashion, who don't have a storefront. I don't know exactly, what the dynamic is down there. But I think if you approach it from a non-discriminatory basis, as you said, where if you're doing business, there should be a registry. You should be able to collect that information and know if they're qualified. Are they licensed? Are they certified? What
And it
what
goes
do they
back
do?
to when you are operating in the town and you register, you will also then sign our business registration, which we were just modifying to say, hey, PS, if you're in a certain production, are you compliant with all the town codes? Are you compliant with the pre-treat ordinance? Are you compliant with that? So you're registering to work in the space and knowing that you are signing off on compliance on the sharing of a system, sharing of a town's resources. Does that make sense? But it's all one thing. Or you do the business based on number of people, which is, small business, it's 0 to 10 or 0 to 5 or one, I mean, 1 to 5. You set it as one fee. The next set is just past that, rather than lodgings this and short-term rentals this and marijuana, you get to pay more because we think you should pay more, and alcohol people, you should pay more. And most of these ones, like if you really want to stick with how they're doing it, yeah, an establishment selling liquor, you couldn't do it. You couldn't have them because they're state licensed. Almost every single one of them, well, all of them have retail with it. So there's that loophole into it. So you could still require a business license of them because they all have retail.
I understand your timeline with business licenses renewing July 1st, correct?
Yeah.
And so the lead up to that, I don't know if we should make a decision on what way we should go until we see, where the tea leaves are pointed on this. See what a couple other towns are doing. Are they ignoring it? Are
I
they,
think that's what
Yeah.
green bombs do.
yeah. I mean, I don't think we touch this until we're told to touch it. I mean, I like arguing it, I like doing that. Yeah, I don't think we touch it until we see where it's going, because it is so good.
Okay.
And when you do,
Have we had
No.
this one?
probably 3 months.
So that's not law currently. It's just.
No, I'm sure this was signed by the governor. It was.
That's, yeah,
Yeah.
that one. And we talked about it in July. Is it July? Yeah, July of last year at one of the summits. I mean, this was one of the 2 hot dogs, the ADUs and this one, and how it really affected municipalities. And
So the municipal comments that we sent out, about, I think this is one of the items we covered.
I think we're still,
Yeah.
when it's not until the summer.
It's in May.
Mm-hmm.
I think we let this go for this cycle.
For this year, just leave it as it is. Okay.
Don't follow what I say. I get in trouble all the time.
What do you guys think? I mean, you could put a lot of work
Did I hear
into
that
it.
right?
Turn wrong, be wrong. What was that, Nikki?
Did I hear that right? I guess I don't know what I just heard. We're just leaving it for the year, and we're just. Are
Well,
we
none of
still
the,
gonna?
I think so.
For now,
I would suggest.
So we are still gonna charge business licenses for this year.
Just leave it just as it is.
I would suggest you guys change
Okay.
it to business registration this year. Because that will get rid of the license side of this. Because if someone has a liquor license from the state and they read this, or their attorney says, hey, you don't have to pay for Ennis business license anymore because you're already licensed. You guys aren't gonna have a leg to stand on.
Well, I know in the retail space, the state does not have a reseller's license in Montana. It doesn't exist. So when I call Orvis and place an order and I wanted it wholesale, they say, send your state reseller number. Well, that doesn't exist in Montana. Well, then we can't sell wholesale to you. So I send them my city business license and that qualifies for it.
Mm-hmm.
saved you more than $50, didn't it?
Yeah, like 100. Yeah.
Yeah, but Tony, to change just that one word, it has to go through an ordinance change. It's got to have 2 readings, and then it doesn't take effect.
And most of,
Be done by July 1st. Okay, or you just put license/registration on that form.
You change it, you still have to go through the process Ginger just described.
If you change a comma, you have to.
Yeah.
Well, it's got to be a
Change it in
significant
here.
change, but a name change is significant.
So there's 3 months before that happens.
So yeah, I guess we need to do more
for
research.
anything establishing that already has, that doesn't mean that you can't still change it. If you really want to contend with it, at the end of the day, they still have to take a liquor, all the liquor ones have retail. They still have to pay basic business license. And that's what I was saying about,
But the liquor
Dis-
license allows them to sell liquor.
but not retail,
Not retail.
not the retail portion. Anything extra. It's like you are a hair salon. Do you sell shampoo? Do you sell? The liquor stores have copper mugs. They have other little things in there. A t-shirt makes you a basic business license, and you can take it out, but then as soon as you put it back in, and I guess that's your choice, but most of them are going to be like, I'll pay the $50.
So this is license fees based on,
The liquor store that you have in town that just sells liquor is probably, they might have an argument that they're licensed to sell liquor and that's all they're doing. So you can't ask them to do another license. But I agree with what you're saying, Nikki. If, the Gravel Bar or any of those other bars, I mean, they serve food, beer, and alcohol.
And
So
t-shirts and hats, and
yeah,
they all do. I mean, I can't think of any place in town that actually doesn't have something that is,
It has a
not to pick
professional,
on Nikki, but I know that there's not just bottles of liquor. There's other cool things in there. I can get my wine opener. It's not liquor. It's other retail that's not. I can get my copper mug. It's a basic business license, which they're not prohibiting us from doing business licenses. It's like ones that are state issued. So at the end of the day,
We're not licensing John to guide.
No, you're
You're
licensing my fly
licensing it.
shop to sit on Main Street.
Yeah.
Which I'm fine with. I mean,
For $50.
yeah, for $50 or whatever. fine.
And that's what I was saying. The fee schedule itself, we could do by resolution. That's why I was saying if you did the fee schedule, that's a one and done. And you could say business license for this amount of people, this. Instead of how it's broken down. See what I'm saying?
So
Where is it in
What-
there?
3-7
What do you mean
dash.
by,
Sorry, Nikki, what
What
was
do you
that?
last page of the
what do you
section.
mean by this amount of people? Employees or
Employees.
what is that?
Yeah.
Just go to
Okay.
4 and then back to the page.
A lot of places, that's what they do it. It's based on the number of employees.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, we had it prior.
Wasn't this just amended?
Yes.
Mhm.
Couple years ago.
Yeah.
Last
Last year.
22. Year before, first year.
So you're suggesting that as a workaround, so we would just wouldn't specify any specific business, it would just be based off of employees.
Mhm.
I like the logistics of that and it sounds legal. It covers us.
What do you gain by that? I'm not
I don't know.
contesting it. I'm just curious what's the upside to doing that?
Well, it's not discriminating what type of, whether you're, in Mr. Greenbaum's case, attorney in town, he's just a business with one person, so we charge him X number of dollars.
So Joe's floor covering is in Bozeman, and they come to Ennis to put the floor covering in the new market. They have 50 employees, but they're only sending 2 to Ennis.
Devil's advocate.
That's a
Oh,
good
it
one.
does come up.
Devil's advocate. I got you what you're
That's why
saying.
we're at this one.
But they don't need a business license here to do that.
I beg
Yeah,
your
They
pardon?
don't they need a business license here
Yes.
to
I
send
have
two
3
people down.
businesses.
If you're going to
Licenses.
generate income within the town of Ennis, you need to have a business license.
I have one in Bozeman, one in Bridges, and one here.
I fully support that.
I think the schedule should stay.
Even though your storefront is located in Bozeman, for example.
Mhm.
Okay.
But contractors traditionally work off-site. They work where they work, not at their base. it's a very common practice.
So I'm wondering how many towns have been through it. And I bet by the end of Fairmont's convention, that's the whole legal gathering, basically.
I thought the legal was in the fall.
It is, the legal. But they'll be covered.
But the
They'll wrap up
Tallston-
some of this for May also.
The Tallston section, just specifically at Fairmont, is just the
That's the
lawyers.
lawyers.
And I bet they'll kick this one hard around.
How often does the town go out to a job site and look to see who's working on that job site and say, oh, you came over here, you're a cider, you're from Bozeman, you have to pay us a business license? How often does that ever happen?
I think most of them just come in. Honestly, we had, especially with like the grocery store, it's very typical for a town to say, you need a business license to operate in the town. And a whole bunch of them came in April before, I mean,
They have been coming in for the last year.
before they even broke ground, and they got a license in April and they weren't even starting yet. Just to make, it's a pretty steady stream of going in and checking. Person, he has 3 of them. Good job.
It's probably a result of the general contractor and the fact that Madison Foods is locally owned. So, they want to make sure that everybody working there is compliant and that they don't have any problems with the town. So they probably sent the word out to anybody that was coming to work there. Hey, make sure you go into town hall and get your, business license, because we want to make sure that we're
Want it right
compliant.
now because they're not gonna run them on the site without it. They gotta email it to me so I can show it to them.
That's the beautiful thing about small towns, is that they're self-policing to a certain degree.
So is that, say, for example, the company in Bozeman, they send their employees down here? The employee needs it, or are they subcontracting to another company that they're sending down here? To
Well,
do, say, for example, do the flooring?
The finished flooring contractor is sending employees here to put the floor down.
So.
The excavation contractor, the structural company, the refrigeration.
Yeah.
Every one of them. And whether they send an employee or it's the owner that comes, they're still generating income in the town of Ennis. And they're required to be licensed, registered. And not everybody that we think is the contractor and has a license with the state is really licensed as a contractor. They have a document from the state that says they're an independent contractor and they're exempt from unemployment and
That's what
workers'
that
compensation.
Mhm.
That's all that means. I think we let it ride.
What do you think? Leave it alone until we won't take close? Or-
Yeah, probably, and you can gather more information. Around this whole thing.
Maybe I'll keep digging into it. It's fine.
Yeah, we gotta find what our towns are doing. Because if it's that big an issue, every small town in Montana that requires a business license is going, holy, we gotta fix this right now.
Yeah.
And, but I don't get that impression that that's going on. And maybe I'm wrong, but
But
Right.
until that starts going on,
Yeah, ultimately, if no other towns comply with it, what are they gonna do?
Yeah.
Send state trooper down here or what's happening?
I say let it ride.
Corey, we'll let it ride.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll all do more homework and start digging, see what else we can find on that. And Nikki, sorry. I need more than the collar there. Nikki, are you good just not touching this one for now and doing more research on it and seeing
Ye-
what other?
Yes, I'm good with that.
All right.
I guess worst case, if they're, how long would it take us to do the public hearing and to post it properly? And when does this legislation, it went into effect at beginning of 2024?
No, our business licenses are on fiscal year.
Just talking about the new law.
The new law.
It doesn't
Is
have
it
a.
so-
It didn't.
I
start
see a
date.
date.
I didn't read the start date on there. Sometimes it says this law becomes enacted.
Effective
Yeah.
October,
I
whatever.
thought it was October 23.
And so if not, then it's, as soon as it gets the signatures on the back page.
I didn't see a date.
No.
So I wish I could share my screen, not just like my face with you guys. I wish I had that ability to do that right now because, I mean, you could actually do this probably there and go to, I just typed in Google Bozeman business license. And it's interesting what they have posted here. And they start out saying everybody, doing business, professions, occupations. Yeah, you're all required to get a license. And then they talk about who's exempt, and they talk about the state licensed professions, including realtors, medical professionals, cosmetologists, architects, etc. And then what's interesting though, because apparently they haven't updated their website, they have on here license types which require supporting documentation: plumbers, electricians, daycare centers, mobile vending. Now, I think the plumbers and electricians would be exempt under this amendment, so they probably have to amend that. But then as you scroll down, you see their application, information sheet, quick guide, wastewater discharge for business. So again, that's how you tie it in. Are you compliant with wastewater? Home-based business acknowledgement form. And then this one is very interesting. Business security checklist provided by Bozeman Police. So again, this gets back into what I was saying about the registration process is tied into public health and safety, with, do you have hazardous waste? Do you have volatile substances? Do you have, are you compliant with the current fire codes? And this is what the registration is, the intent and purpose of. It's not to grant them a license necessarily to do business, but it's to certify that their registration is complete from a public health and safety standpoint. That's your intent and purpose.
So it's
Like Nikki has said, it's like, they don't know what's going on down here. They don't know. They don't care. But it's up to you to provide that safety.
Correct. Yeah, you could have a plumber operating here in town, and if nobody asks the question of whether they're certified or whether they have a business license and the town is checked, it's totally the honor system. So
May 2nd, cover their site.
23.
right. So
Well, it's a discussion item for you guys tonight, and so you have to leave it as a discussion. You can't make any decisions, but you're basically, we'll get more information and we'll track it and we'll see what we can do,
Okay.
well, when we're creating our future agenda, can we do? Would that involve chapter 4, health and welfare. Would that explain? I just want to have it all written down for when we pull the trigger. Yes, the word.
Okay. This is a keep an eye on, figure it out. Because it's not like, I mean, every town had business license requirements.
While you're doing it, you might want to consider. Right now,
You know what's really interesting, Nikki? It was about
Wait.
a year ago.
Maria's talking.
Oh,
Sorry,
I'm
she
sorry.
doesn't. We're sharing a mic.
we don't collect any information that proves to us they are licensed with the state. John Doe, the plumber, that he has liability insurance. Those are things you might want to address within this change that you're gonna do.
When that all be done, well, again, you guys don't pull plumbing permits. Where places do have to pull plumbing permit and you have to provide.
We don't.
I know, but I'm just saying, so is there a way to implement, you have these plumbers coming, and again, you know, it's going on with the honor system. Is it really? You know, this way, I'm doing, you know, plumbing on this.
Plumbing and electrical is regulated by the state and they do have to take permits out.
From the state. but
From the state.
Town also. I'm just saying, I mean, other places, that they're required to come into the town, apply for a permit when they put their license.
Then we have to have a plumbing inspector on staff, an electrical inspector on staff.
With all this building, I think it's a good idea.
The state is inspecting it.
The state's expecting them and all that.
The state does commercial inspection
Those are the only two trades, and residential for plumbing and electrical.
for plumbing and electrical,
Yeah.
not the whole building.
No,
That's,
but for
Different.
commercial they'll.
yes. The whole thing, and then you're right, electrical and plumbing is always inspected by the state.
And why is fire suppression not included in the state or county?
I think it is. If it's a commercial project, the state is regulating that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So kind of tied, we're gonna watch this one and see what we can do here. I still think it's gonna be needs to be fixed.
I think if you come back from the meeting in May and say, yeah, like every town's like working on this right now,
Mm-hmm.
then we go back at
Okay.
it. If you come back and say, yeah, waiting to see who the guinea pig is.
Who wants to go first?
We don't want to be the guinea pig.
Okay. Well, it's like the,
So pointed out.
I can't remember which one, but the accessory dwelling units, nobody was really touching anything in it. And I expected somebody to challenge it formally, and it happened. So everybody's still like waiting, like, do we do anything in zoning? Or they're kind of waiting to see how this whole court case goes. So I have an accessory dwelling units. You could put them anywhere. And I'm like, well, wait. That could make a mess in town. Like you could triple your population with no infrastructure to support that by having accessory dwelling units like everywhere. And that's basically what
You could quit issuing permits, by the way. Period.
but that one was
Moratorium.
challenged. So I was wondering if this was going to be, because it was strange, but apparently not. To me, it was strange. All right, special event. I sent you a whole lot. And this is from my management portion of town.
Never just open that and hit print without counting how many.
54 something. I know.
Trust me.
So this is my nightmare from this. Like, we don't have guidelines for anybody that wants to use our stuff. Not really. Do you remember we had this conversation on like what gives you the authority to sign encroachment permits and special and user agreements. Remember this conversation vaguely a while ago? We need to establish that as an actual ordinance and policy, and why we do it. Pretty much, again, everybody else is doing it, and there's a reason for that, so that people know what you expect if you're using their stuff.
So a couple quick questions right off the top. What title and chapter is this going to fit into?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I don't know either. That's
Or
why I'm asking.
if it's its own, or you can create your own.
Okay, because I kind of tried to figure out where it
I
might,
was-
and I don't know where it would
I
fit.
think the pretreatment became one of its own.
Well, it's not its own.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah, it might be Title 14.
I just didn't know if you had like a plan to sandwich it in with something else.
It doesn't really fit anywhere other than public ways and property.
Yeah.
That was the only one that I could kind of see it in with its own section. Because Lions Club Park is kind of in there. Your sidewalks are where are getting used. And camping regulations. It's the only one that kind of fits. You could probably put it in Title 8. But I like the idea of if you're using our property, these are the requirements. And this is when we set those requirements. Because it's not. And like the Lions Club and I just kind of get these like, hey, we want to do this. What do you think? You're like, there's no guidelines for this. It's sure, why not? I mean, we need to have something so that people know what we expect and what we should be providing otherwise.
You know, I read through all of these. It's thrilling reading, by the way.
I think Craig's.
I think, you know, this one, what is it? West Yellowstone does as good a job as any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're concise, you know. Livingston has 30 pages and West Yellowstone accomplishes it. The same thing and better, in my opinion, in 5 pages. I mean, I think if we're going to go down that road, we ought to look at West Yellowstone
as the model of it.
Yeah, it's a shining example.
And I know the Denver one was weird, but if you linked into Denver and their site, it was actually pretty cool because it was right off the bat like, if you are on town property and meet any of these two, then you have to. But if not, just carry on. If you're on town property and you're having a family picnic or a family gathering of 10 of you, or it's by invite only, like ignore this website. You know what I mean? It was pretty cool in that, like, here's when you have to do it and when you don't have to do it. That was the only part that I like really loved instantly. But West Yellowstone's was most concise. I gave their ordinance. I think Livingston is their policy and their.
Yeah, and they have a lot of city parks.
They have a lot.
Oh.
But West Yellowstone has like a pavilion. They have a dining hall, a pavilion, a community center. But it was pretty basic in it could easily expand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If the town expanded it.
And what I got from all of them is the cost of this permit or special events license, whatever you want to call it, is all pretty much the same, relatively the same between all of these examples. The timeline of 60 days out is pretty set between all of them. You need to apply 60 days before your event. The insurance, that I paid particular attention to that. And all of them have that $1.5 million.
You caught it.
Yep, they all of them have that. And all of them have increased insurance if you serve alcohol, which I think is probably smart. And all of them over a certain level have checkoffs by the police, fire, ambulance, all of that for, and it could just be, I mean, if we had it, it would just be cheap more, does this look good yet? Sign it, away you go. I mean, but all of them had those things in common. And if we were going to write it, we should probably incorporate those things.
Okay. Agreed. Corey, your take on these? Yes, no, go.
Uh, Yeah, I would say the West Yellowstone.
And then, okay, this is kind of like what prompted this in my mind. The Lions Club sends me their schedule of what's going on at the park. Who needs the special events and who doesn't? Needs to really be figured out. Because I'm like, oh, somebody wants to teach soccer to 2 and 3-year-olds. Do they need a user agreement? See? Just by your gut, you're like, yeah, ignore. Everything booked in the pavilion. I'm like, end of life celebration, birthday party, family reunion. I just chuck it into the Lions Club Go party thing. You know what I'm saying? But it's all at my discretion at this point, and it's like, can the baseball club do concessions?
Would it make sense to have something if you're making profit, then you're held at a different, if you're trying to raise money for something, or if you're making money at something, you're held at a different standard, I guess?
I guess, and maybe looking at the liability side of it,
That's where I was worried.
that's, it has to be a consideration of what the net was.
You know, West Yellowstone kind of figures it out. They have these, definitions. What is a special event? What is a parade route? What is a parade? And then they go into the next section, which special event permit required. And I believe it was all of these things. Parade, political speech, religious speech, demonstration. As long as it's being held on public earth. Is that a parade?
I don't know, but it is a lot.
A special event means a parade, concert, demonstration, block party, march, fun run, walkathon, athletic event, bicycle race, or any such gathering of people in which the activity takes place on, in, or through any public sidewalk, street, right of way, or park. That's how they define it. So it probably would.
So if the Lions Club is sponsored, then they have the insurance, they have the agreement.
Yeah.
They have to have separate.
That's,
For that event.
And we're already named as their additional on.
it would depend on others, yes, how they're from, the agreement is.
Yeah.
I'd say they would have to, because they have to notify.
But our agreement already says that they're notifying us, and they did with their email saying what's going on.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
And that's covered, so that's.
I want to go back and read that. I think I have that memory.
If that event is on, notice. I saw the ad for it today.
Oh, good question.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know the answers to tell people in any guidance, and we need to create an ordinance and a policy to go with it.
I'd
So
say-
that I'm not like, well, I understand that these are 2-year-olds playing soccer, and I don't care about those, but female teenage soccer players are like number one for concussions. So yeah, you have to have it because I want you to have liability insurance because you're more likely to be concussed in girls soccer than you are in football. It's true though.
That's that. I mean, number one, do we need this? I mean, that's the question you're asking, right? Number one, do we need this? Yes. I think everybody agrees that we need special events. I mean, special events, like license or permit or whatever you want to draft it as. So yeah, if that question is yes, then number two is who's going to write the code to bring it in front of us? I mean,
No, I don't mind drafting something on this. And the reason that I brought it up is because I've run into so many. I can see that Livingston has had somebody in Livingston had the same fun that I have had. And that's why theirs is written this way, because they're like, I just want it all covered.
so yeah, I mean, answering question one, yes, should we have this, then it just leads to how do we get it? Write the code, check off.
The resolution is the only one, and I can work with James on that, because that's the where, like, why are we doing this? But mostly it's like, we need to know that you have liability insurance and that the town isn't going to be held responsible for you doing stupid stuff on our property. Because the taxpayers shouldn't pay for other stupid people doing stupid stuff. So, alright. Kind of resolution and start drafting up some ordinance and what we think it's going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, I would go off what's also.
Yeah.
Copy and paste and just start.
Rearranging. I might pick some of the stuff that stood out in some of the other ones, but we agree 60 days, and it's okay for. Do you want it as just the mayor signs it off as long as it meets the requirements that we set? Bridger has it. You do it before 2 council meetings, and the council reviews all of the special ones. Everybody's like, no.
I think there needs to be multiple sign-offs. I think, anything.
Well, and that's like our current user agreement has, I sign off on it, John signs off on it, and Ginger. Then Ginger signs off on it.
Yeah, something like that.
So that we have multiple eyes on it, and we have like requirements for the insurance and a parade route, but there's nothing really, it needs to be clear is what it needs. But that gets me back to the vendor fee on the business license. I think if you wrote this special events well, you get rid of the vendor fee and you just have a special events fee. Yes.
So, but under the cap, each vendor gets a license
Oh, not a license.
$20.
Mm-hmm.
So in this, then it would just be the chamber that has to pay.
The special event, yeah. You're the host.
Well, not really. I mean, we bake it into this one, you bake it into what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's no checking on vendors. You're hosting the event. It's part of your costs at hosting an event. You have to know what your costs are to evaluate how you're going to set up your booth fee. And that's how that goes. But that would make it easier and not, you know what I'm saying? If you know it for the full event, not based on how many vendors you get.
And we're gonna have a year in advance to figure this out.
Yeah.
We're not gonna get
We're not going to get this done. We're not going to get this done before TAP. We're not going to, this we might have done before the 4th of July, but it's still not going to. But I think it really needs done in a policy and a fee schedule set. So I'm not saying no to like things that, yeah.
You know, it has a pretty good paragraph in here about the city being able to restrict parking, vehicle parking on any street, the parade route. I like that part.
In West Yellowstone?
I think
No, no,
DOT might fix that for you.
no. No. It doesn't differentiate. It doesn't differentiate. So we don't own that. We don't own that.
All right.
Contact NBC.
Yeah, MGT will do that for you eventually. Not for you, they're gonna do it.
So, as I'm drafting, we know the 60 days. We agree.
Insurance, 1.5.
1.5 additional for alcohol.
I think
Yeah,
what-
that's all of them that I saw was an
Yeah, I think all
additional
of them were-
1.5 for alcohol.
Yep.
What was my other?
Cost, they're all between $50 and $150.
The one that like kind of stood out to me is they did. I want to say it was 100 and or I don't know what the price was, but they did a half if you proved that you were a 501c3.
I saw it, I highlighted that, but
It doesn't change the fact that that still costs the town to do additional
Exactly.
resources to get to it.
the 501c3 still need to jump through the same hoops, they just get charged less, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then again, everybody who does any events in this town is a big 501c3.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't change the fact that the whole purpose of it, like the fees and everything, is there. It takes a little bit on the town's part, like a lot of it. Let's be honest with the parade. It takes a lot of man hours. It takes a lot of resources to pull that off. So we're basically recuperating some cost to host a big party. We do all the garbage bags. We do that. Have the guys go down on a holiday and do the garbage however many times. And it's a thing. Yep, we have to have them do traffic control. All of our radios and resources are out for it. All of our additional radios that I think they're $600 a piece, so that we can run traffic for it. So just leave it cost.
We're gonna talk about all this
But they're all about the same. So somewhere between 50 and 100.
You go to the chamber, they put on the parade, it's $100 for the permit. You still can come back on that? $100.
All right. 60 days. And then final sign off for it should be clerk. Leave it as it is, clerk, officer, and the mayor. All right, I'll draft resolution, and we'll start hashing out an actual ordinance for it, and then the policy to go with it.
Nikki.
Yes? You said the
So-
definitions are going to be the important part of that.
Yeah, and so I just would ask the commissioners to give some feedback on at what point would a gathering, a parade, a bike rally, block party, at what number of persons would you want to trigger this special event permit?
Well, number one, I mean, if they're closing down city sidewalk, streets, or property, then that triggers, right?
Ah,
What if it's just in the park?
the homecoming parade gets, you gotta shut the streets down for it.
NBT gets involved in that? And then they have the truck parade at the night of the Christmas stroll, or whenever they do that. I mean, that's just an individual that is taking it upon themselves to put that together. Are they within, that they don't shut down the highway?
Use the homecoming parade because there's children in the middle of the road.
Is MBT involved in that?
I see that.
Some of the school districts.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There'll be, I think there's going to be a lot to go through and actually draft. It seemed like a really easy one, and there's some really good examples, so I'm glad we're not the first, but there'll be stuff to figure out as we go through. But at least this gives me a base as to where to go.
Yeah, my bike race is under 50, so I think over 50. More expense to a non-profitable.
Okay.
I know, I do need to do that.
We're adjourning then. Oh, good. Resolution worked for the meters and the.
It's better if it's, number of people, it didn't matter.
And I think that's how Livingston.
That's how Livingston does it.
Yeah.
And West Yellowstone, if you dig deeper, because they've got the pavilion and it's rented separate.
Yeah, they got the second year park gazebo, the ticket shelter. Yeah, they got all
Oh, fee schedules for it. Huh, cool.
Not for long. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, well, that's what I'm saying. When Denver said, "Are you on town property? Do you meet any of these requirements?" Is it, and they automatically said exempt was like by invite only, right? So basically, your family reunions, your everything else didn't need a special permit. So that's why I was mentioning that one is maybe we pull some of those like these are the things that automatically make you exempt. Unless you're having a whole Irish wake and there's 500 of you and you're drinking at the park, then you might have to have a little bit of liability insurance. Just a random example. We've never had any problem with that. But anything that this, yes, we don't have an open container. The town would have to have ordinance on open container. We did specifically set it aside as part of our camping regulations that you can't have it there. I don't know how many towns don't have it. in how many years? I know, I didn't even think about it till you go somewhere where they do have it, and you're from somewhere where they don't have it, and they let you know in a hurry.
It's mandatory for softball league.
I think it's more rare than to have no open container, because when I bartended in Virginia City, there's no open container, and everybody would comment on it. On a go cup, they're like, you can walk around. Yeah. Oh, apparently that's weird. And if you were to tackle that, you automatically pick specific days where it doesn't exist, aka the fuck is it? But I think that's a whole other thing that you'd have to do that. I mean, that's a special event.
That's a whole nother council. Wrong one.
Which means that every chamber event downtown should hold 1.5 plus half. And we have to look and see if there's anything else that we deem high risk that would need additional. No, but you have to deem that it's actually high risk and show a reason for it. Well, we have our list of things that you're not allowed to do, period. And no bouncy houses on
No
there.
bouncy houses, I was gonna put one of those in from the shop.
I know you were, and that's why I put it in there. All right.
With all the cars parked there?
Yeah, on top of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
you gotta put it in there about 2 weeks before the 4th of July.
All right. I'll start prepping 2 resolutions. Hopefully, at least the water one will be easy. Get that one done first. Okay. We're adjourning. Good night.
Me too, but not that kind of thing.
Oh, can't I? Corey. Corey.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you.
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
And I think caller 1 agreed. Good night, Nikki. All right, James, I'll get with you. I'm sure I'll be picking your brain for some resolutions.
All right. Thank you. Good night,
I'll talk to
everybody.
you Monday.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. You're welcome.
James doesn't have a business license here.
Yeah. That's always been one for a long time. I don't think we've licensed it. We've never licensed one.
Oh, that was fun, wasn't it?
I just thought it was funny.
Ever licensed in?
Tony, you're gonna bring up your single family home or single family dwelling.
Yeah, probably. So after the meeting, we go to, Michelle needed something from Madison Fields. Phone rings. I thought it was a reservation. It was great. He goes, that was a great topic you brought up. And when you do more research on it, I'd love to be involved with you. And then he went on for a half an hour about single family and how you limit it, how you do it, all this stuff. And I mean, for half an hour. No, we have to tackle that. Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah.
Well, but I think it's interesting, like my HOA, I lived over
And, I had 4 people living in my house. And that's how I paid my rent. The HOA said was single family dwelling, can't have roommates. And my argument with their lawyer, which we both started laughing about, which is awesome. She knows, she's like, this guy's like masseuse in the house, massage in exchange for being a roommate. Well, not a roommate for living here. And then I just kind of went on to this, like, this guy's my gardener, or she made up fictitious roles that my roommates were playing. And she suggested that they split it. That was my only.
Well, that's the HOA.
Yeah, well, and the HOA lawyer, but yeah, as far as the town.
He was fine.
Sure.
Okay, I'll show you a house tomorrow. This one we just bought. Has runners in it. So we bought it, didn't find a walkthrough. A crew from Big Sky, and none of them speak English. Pablo and Espanol. 1,300 in a house. We'll go there tomorrow. It's garage.
Yeah, it was density.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. It's paid by the minute.
By the word.
See you guys. See you, Tony. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. Did he call? Oh, cool, yeah. You wonder where it stays, and I said, I don't know, because I think he wants to do other stuff. He's only fishing one day with us, but he's staying longer. So I think he wants to go, he also. So, yeah.